So there's this point, 2 Kings, that I was trying to get to. Minus all the distraction and the crazy of the king's ego, ultimately leading them all to demise, whether being killed, sometimes assassinated by their own commanders, their own confidants, sometimes putting themselves in harm's way because of ego and getting killed, sometimes out of sickness, sometimes out of plague, sometimes out of, we'll say, God's protection on our end, but essentially just like they're done, they're annihilated. But at the very end, we see this unexpected favor from a king who had been following time and time again the lineage of their father that was to kill, steal, and destroy. All right? They were nutty. Just go in and watch. The Lord continued to be angry. And I think about that when we think about that father figure role, especially for like a kiddo's perspective. We're like, oh, I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want dad to get mad. I don't want him to be upset with me. So we often will hide things. Y'all, these kings weren't hiding anything. They were out, bold as can be. And that's what's happening right now. You know, we're called kings. We're actually anointed as kings when we come into the favor of Christ. And what's happening because of these little gods that are being created, these false idols that we're even creating out of ourself and our flesh, the egocentrism that's happening. We're egocentric. Use this word. It's critical to understand. Everything revolves around us. And so we become a false god. We become our own idol. And then we worship false idols in the midst of that. We worship other flags that might be bright and colorful. We worship relationships that are actually not relationships at all. It's okay to have friends. It's likely a friendship. Or we stay in bondage in other relationships that are harmful, that are killing us physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically. And I am an advocate of marriage. But I also know that there's bondage based on the lack of understanding of freedom, liberty, what that actually means, and relationship. And so we're going to talk about it today. We're talking about it now. But I want you to understand that there is favor, even that follows lineage, generation, curse. Right? How many of you guys have divorced parents? How many of you guys have witnessed divorced marriages? How many of you guys have witnessed people either in adultery or not being in a committed relationship because of flesh or acquisition of more things, whether they're in a married relationship or not, that is honestly just to satisfy them? Did you know ultimate love, ultimate sacrifice is the service of other people? It's to be able to learn how to love others as Jesus loved you, and he loved the church. So when all these kings are doing everything, even to their own children's demise, can't even imagine that. We do this all the time, and we think we're a good mom and a good dad, and it's not about being good or bad, but it's this understanding that we have a liberty, that we can exist in a freedom we can exist in that is outside of a law of just honor your father and mother, no questions asked. There's a difference. There's a difference in operation. So we're at this final pinnacle point in 2 Kings. And one of the kings has been essentially taken away from Judah and is being housed in the prison of another king, okay? It's hard for me to know how to say all of their names, so bear with me. King Jehoiachin, which is ultimately, I'm going to tell you a secret, an element of lineage of the son of David, right? So of the King of Kings, of Jesus. And then the other one who is holding him hostage is, I'm sure this isn't how you say it, but his first hyphenated element of his name is evil. So that's not shocking. But evil Merodach. Okay, we're going to go with it. Avel Merodach. If you want to say it's fancy. I need to figure out how to speak in that way. But anyway, this is the Babylonian throne. So if you guys know anything about Babylon, evil being enthroned in Babylon is kind of hilarious. I'm like, that makes total sense. Babylon was the place where they worshipped false idols, where they had a lot of grotesque things going on 24/7. Ultimately, no one was following God. Well, this king who had exiled the other king of Judah for 37 years, he had been in exile. Okay, that's a long time. He was imprisoned for a very, very long time. This evil Babylonian king, for some reason, finds favor in his heart to release him from prison on April 2nd of that year. I have to find out why they shared that year, that date. He spoke kindly to him and gave him a higher place than all the other exiled kings in Babylon. He supplied him with new clothes, come on, grave clothes, to replace his prison guard, and allowed him to dine in the king's presence for the rest of his life. So the king gave him regular food allowance as long as he lived. All right. This really confused me. Like I said, if you read 2 Kings at all, it's really dark. There's a lot of like destruction and just hate, and it kind of feels like our world today in a lot of ways. Luckily, we're not under a kingship in that regard here in America, but there's a lot of people that are trying to be their own kings, whether it's of a business, of a community, of a neighborhood, of a gender, of an ethnic group, right? We see this all the time. And so for this to happen, it comes out of left field. And yet, God has a plan. And this plan was ultimate favor. It was evil. This is his name. Look it up. Avel, or evil, Merodach, decides to give the line of David supernatural, unprecedented, unyielded, undeserved favor. Talk about liberty. Talk about relationship. He let him dine in his presence, the rest of his life. And I'm confused by that. And yet there is some goodness here. Such goodness. If you guys are Bible lovers or Bible scholars, or you got no idea about the Bible, this is like a saucy novel, okay? It really is. You've got to get your hands on it. It's juicy.